And I'll join palms. And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping those joined. Put the palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Yeah. How's everybody doing?
Feeling good after the holiday.
Yeah?
After the Christmas.
Do you want to share more?
Yeah. I'm usually not a guy that's happy about Christmas. I don't know why. It's just me.
Yeah.
I had dinner at my ex-girlfriend's house with her family, and we also went to my sister-in-law's dinner. So it was good just to be around them, just feel and be around the good energy.
Yeah.
And just felt, just light and happy.
Nice.
So it was good.
Thanks for sharing. Holidays are a funny time. I want you all to see how nice I've become. Are you all warm enough right now? It's funny, I've been talking about this a lot lately, but hang on while I use an app to turn this thing off. Crazy how that is, right? My first teacher would always talk about giving people convenience. And, it's kind of like a young meditator, Buddhist person. In fact, recently I saw something that I think described it really well, but it was in Japan, and it was these platform little meditation benches, or platform, almost like the size of a zabuton, a square cushion here. And you see all these people sitting on them, and they're all just in their nice, perfect little meditation posture. And there's maybe 25 of them, and they're all sitting outside in the snow. And I laughed because we're in San Diego and everybody gets freezing. And I realized that was to me, that was the way. It just didn't really matter what the temperature was like. And then all of a sudden, I realized I must be getting old, because I started to actually really care about how comfortable people were. I don't know if I'm getting old, I'm getting nice, I'm not really sure what's going on. But so I just want to make sure you're all comfortable. If anybody gets cold, let me know. We'll turn the heat back on. You can move away from a window, whatever's going on. As long as you're comfortable, then I am happy. Right? See how hard that was for me to say? So, but anyways, back to, that was serious too, but back to the holidays are a funny time, because for a lot of people, they're wonderful and they're fun and they're beautiful. And then the opposite extreme for a lot of people, they just suck. I mean, really. I've never personally liked this time of year. I'm always just waiting for it to fly by and be done. But the holidays can be really painful for a lot of people, and every situation is different, depending upon what your life is like. And I think for those that it's wonderful and happy and joyous, that's great. And for those that it's depressing and miserable and sad and lonely and all those types of things, it's an opportunity to just reflect and realize that you probably have a lot to be grateful for, even though you might feel like you don't at times, and it might bring up a lot of pain and a lot of stuff. And those are also really good opportunities to explore, like, what is that stuff that's coming up? Why is this painful? Why is this sad? Why am I depressed? Like, what's going on with all of that? So either way, these are good opportunities to kind of explore, what's going on with our thoughts and our minds and our hearts. And then the beauty of it is, for those who don't like this time of year, it will soon be over. And we'll be back to just the normal madness of January. And we have a whole year until we have to deal with the madness of December again. So either way, the impermanent nature of all phenomena will occur, and life will continue. So, yeah. Anyone else really not like the holidays? You want to share briefly why?
It's just being older and being estranged from my family. It's just painful.
Yeah.
I feel isolated. Whatnot.
Yeah. Understood. I appreciate you sharing. I don't know for you, sometimes for me, if things are uncomfortable or painful, just to get them out and express them in a room full of complete strangers is always helpful.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. All right, so we're going to start with the meditation practice. For those who are joining virtually, thanks for showing up. Glad you're here. Feel free as you are. There's a chat box on your screen somewhere to say hello. But a couple things I'll tell you before we begin with the meditation practice. Nothing's going to happen to you. Right? You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Right? Don't judge your practice. You don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is full of chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps. Slide to the front third, pushing the stomach forward, allows the back to straighten. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, also just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders. Hands are on the knees or lap, whatever's comfortable. And will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with your eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. Start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing the sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, just sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. Realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit, hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samutpata, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in and where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way we responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how we respond to everything else that's happening throughout our days. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not always fun. It's actually almost never fun. I always say it's not always fun, almost implying as if it's fun sometimes. Has anyone else wondered, like, when is it fun? Like, no one's ever said to me. I always say it's not always fun. I've been saying the same thing for like 12 years. And no one's ever said to me, like, well, when is it fun? Pretty much never, but I just, like you'd have hope that maybe sometimes this will be fun. It's not. I think I need to change what I say. This practice is never fun. It's never easy. That just sounds so miserable, Go back to it's not always fun. It sounds better. But it's a challenge, is my point, right? It is a daily practice. It really doesn't alter that much. It's just the same thing over and over and over again, practicing the same things. It's boring. It really is. But it's incredibly beneficial and life-changing if you can apply it to your life. And that's why it's called a practice. The one thing I was going to talk about tonight that was on my mind as I was kind of at the beginning just doing my offerings is the practice of patience. It's one of what we call the paramitas, loosely translates to perfection. The 6 paramitas on the bodhisattva practice of generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, and wisdom. All 6 important. But for some reason, just patience has been, really in my mind a lot recently. Just lots of challenges. We all have challenges. So really just last few weeks, just dealing with things that are to an extent out of my control, but things that, you still want to try to have an impact on. And you just, for me, always coming back to the practice of patience. I cannot control anything outside of my thoughts, my words, and my actions. And if you wholeheartedly, with all of your intention in each moment, are doing your best to come from a place of thinking good thoughts and speaking good words and doing good deeds, then you just default to the practice of patience and just allowing life to happen. Because you can't force things. And so much of our struggles in life are around that, wanting to force things to be a certain way or wanting to change certain things or wishing certain things, could be different. And so the practice of patience allows you to just be with life as it is. and surrender to the outcome that you're holding on to so deeply. The practice of patience also applies to being patient with yourself. This is something I often warn people around with Buddhism is, you've been around it for 3 months or 3 years or whatever it is. And so there's often this idea of like, well, I should have this figured out by now. Right? And it doesn't work that way. Every day is going to be a new challenge, a different challenge, sometimes the same challenge, but every day is just, life will just keep getting thrown at you and you just have new opportunities to practice patience. It's not like you do this Buddhist thing for 6 months and all of a sudden you're like, all right, cool. My life is a piece of cake now, I got it. No, it doesn't work that way. In fact, for a while, the more you practice this, almost life gets a little more challenging because, the awareness begins to kick in of areas you could be kinder or gentler. The awareness begins to kick in of areas or I should say people or things in your life that are unhealthy. All that stuff, you start to become aware of that. And then you come back to the practice of patience with yourself. That doesn't matter how many Buddhist books you read or how many meditations you go to, it's going to be really difficult to practice patience the rest of your life. And so you just know that. So be patient with yourself. Don't forget to, pat yourself on the back every once in a while and just give yourself some credit for keep trying, right? Trying to think if I should tell this story or not, but yeah, so I can tell the story, leaving names out and images out and people out, so you'll have no idea who it is. But myself and somebody else just put somebody else in a car that they were not driving, they were in no shape to drive, but on their way back to rehab. And this is starting with a week long and a detox and at the moment of, and this was just like this afternoon, at that moment, the person was, not so sober, and but definitely could talk and so as I do with this person often, I definitely try to make them laugh and cry all at the same time and make them see what's going on. And so I told this person I was talking about, they asked something about Buddhism, and I said, the Buddha talked about diligence. And the one thing that you're really good at is diligence, because you just keep going back to rehab, right? And the individual was able to laugh at the fact that the effort is there. The intention, the effort is there. They're not getting the result that they want, but they're still at it. They're still trying. And very often with life, that's just what we got to do. We just have to show up and keep trying. And that's very often all we can do in each moment. Keep trying. Keep showing up. Keep practicing. Keep being diligent. And be patient. So with that, I'll pause. For me, I really just prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that's on your mind. And use the rest of our brief time this evening for that. And for those who are joining virtually, again, welcome, glad you're here. Same, feel free if you have any questions or thoughts to put them in the chat box, and I'll do my best to respond there as well. So we'll open up to questions, thoughts. Yeah.
I've been searching for a source of the core teachings, and it's been really hard. Are there any books or just anything where I can learn the teachings?
Yeah, so the question for those who didn't hear it is, you've been looking for the source, a source of the core teachings, and is there any book or anywhere you can find it? So a couple things to understand about the core teachings. When the Buddha was alive, 500 years before Christ, and he taught as he roamed around from the age of 35 to 80. So for 45 years he walked and spread the teachings, right? People came to visit him in the monastery and all that stuff. And the entire time he was alive, it was all the teachings got what are now called sutras. I'll get to that in a minute. But everything was memorized. It wasn't like they're sitting there 2,500 years ago with iPhones recording all this stuff, So everything was memorized. after he passed away, sometime between, I don't know, maybe 30, 40, 50 years, I'm not a scholar, scholars debate roughly, the amount of time that passed, but somewhere, say, around 50 years after he passed, they came together at a council, and or within 50 years, they came together to council and said something to the effect of, that was some pretty good stuff, we should probably write this down. So Ananda, who was one of his disciples, they say had perfect memory, perfect recall. And they began to transcribe on palm leaves what he recalled the Buddha said. And they were written down in what's called sutras. The word sutra means thread. So it's like a thread of the teachings, right? Now, that's why most of the sutras, right, these core teaching sutras, they start out with something to the effect of at such and such place, at such and such time, with such and such people. The Buddha once said. Okay, so it was retelling of what he said. All of that is transcribed in what's called the Pali Canon. Have you come across that yet? P-A-L-I, Pali Canon, right? And now, if you go to the website accesstoinsight.org, the entire Pali Canon is there, translated eventually, ultimately into English. So to answer your question, what you're looking for is the Pali Canon. Those are the original teachings of the Buddha in what's called Theravada Buddhism. It was really the Buddhism that developed and spread Southeast Asia, Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, etc. About 500 years later, it goes north, China, Japan, Korea. 1,000 years after he died, it goes into Tibet. So you have the development of other Buddhist schools and Buddhist teachings. But to answer your question directly, you're looking for the Pali Canon, and you can find that for free on Access to Insight. Yeah, for sure. Have fun. Yeah.
Saturday, a woman was having problems with fever.
Oh, yeah.
And you gave her a number of solutions, possibilities. And you said prayer.
At the end, I said that, yeah.
And as I was leaving, I was wondering, who do you pray to?
Right.
Who do you pray to? Is prayer the same as meditation?
Yeah. Was I joking? Was I serious? You never can tell with me, Because what I said at the end, after I said all that, and I said, and if that all doesn't work, then just pray. And it's actually interesting. I feel maybe I should share this now, but where that kind of thought got put into my head is, and I don't really talk publicly about it, and she's great now. It's a miracle she's still alive. But January 13, 2020, my mother had a hemorrhagic stroke. 8 days later, had an additional bleed, hydrocephalus, one in the brain, all kinds. She shouldn't have lived, right? 4 years later, she's doing great. When they said at the time that she had a 3% chance of living and a 0% chance of ever cognitively functioning again, right? This is almost 4 years ago. And when the neurologist came in, we're in the ICU, and he said what he said, and my dad turned to him and he said, "Well, what can we do?" And the neurologist said, "Just pray," right? And my father didn't like that answer, of course. But at that moment, that's in essence what he was saying. I'm going to answer your question directly, but where that kind of comment specifically comes into my mind is literally from that moment where, when I'm talking about this stuff, and I was talking about patience, and she asked about patience, and I actually referenced somebody from last Tuesday who asked a question about patience, and I kind of tied those two together. And at the end, I said, if all of that doesn't work, just pray, right? And I think prayer is important for people who believe that prayer is important. And the reason I say it like that is when the Buddha was alive, so he was raised Hindu gods and goddesses, endless gods and goddesses, and they believed in prayer, and they prayed to gods and goddesses. Now, when people asked him about that specifically, if they should believe in gods and goddesses, he in essence didn't answer that question. He said, roughly, it's up to you. If you believe in them, you do. If you don't, you don't. I'm just a human. That's what he was saying, right? He's not a god. He couldn't tell them. He was just a human. And so he left it up to them. And the reason the way for me that I translate it to today, that teaching, is that the people that come here, as you know, they're not 99% of the people that come here are not Buddhist, right? If there's 100 people in here and I say, how many of you are Buddhist? You'll see one hand, maybe two, and another person who's like half in, half out. They're not sure they want to be Buddhist. They don't know what it means, so they're not even sure if they should raise their hand or not. What that means is most of the people who come here grew up in a religion where prayer was part of their life. And if prayer is a part of your life, whether it's from the Buddhist lens or another religious lens, then by all means, keep that as a part of your life. You can still practice and be Buddhist and engage in prayer. I'll get to Buddhist prayer in a minute, but I wanted to touch on that first. That, if you have a Muslim, Christian, Catholic, Mormon, Jewish faith and prayer is a part of your life, keep that. Somebody years ago in a prison group, I'll never forget, he was talking about the 11th step of being prayer and meditation. And what he said was, both were important. And he said for him, he would do prayer first. He would do meditation first to allow himself to get quiet, calm, settled. And he looked at meditation as an opportunity to kind of connect with him and allow himself to be in the present moment. And then would go into prayer to whoever he was praying to. And I thought that was also another really beautiful application of how you tie prayer and meditation together. From a Buddhist standpoint, I pray to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas every day. And some believe in them and some don't, right? Each culture, each tradition is different. But for me, all of my offerings are to different Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. All of my, may all beings be at peace, may all be free from suffering. The way that you do that is different for each person. But one thing I'll always say is calling upon all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in all time, in all space, in all directions, just so I'm covered. Right? You don't want to miss any of them, right? You don't want to offend any of them. You don't want to leave anyone out, All Buddhas, all Bodhisattvas, all time, all space, all directions. Please hear my prayers. And Kuan Yin, as one example, right? So that's the Bodhisattva in the center, the large statue there. She is hearer of the world's cries. That's what her name literally means. Her name means hearer of the world's cries. So she hears all the suffering and then pours out compassion to heal. So literally this moment, there are millions of Buddhists all over the world calling her name for prayer. And they will pray to her no different than someone in maybe a Western culture would pray to God or whoever you're praying to. And they have devout faith-based belief in that prayer, connecting with that Buddha or Bodhisattva. But I've found it really difficult for many Western people to kind of adapt that into their views if they didn't grow up with that. Which is also ironic to me because somehow we've been able to adapt all these beliefs and other, gods that apparently are out there. So does that answer your question? It kind of scratches the surface a little bit, but you could literally Google like praying to bodhisattvas and just read, and you'll see all different cultures and traditions and the way they do it. But for me, with Buddhism in general, I was like, okay, 95% of this stuff makes logical, practical, perfect sense. If the 5% that maybe doesn't make sense to me just because I didn't grow up around it or with it, I'm like, hey, 95% makes sense, then I'm all in. I just added the other 5%. What else? Yeah.
I'm curious as to stillness. Technically we're never still, right? The universe is never still, it's expanding. It's inside of us, our bodies are moving constantly. So what is it?
What is stillness? Well, I can tell you what it's not, it's much easier. I think, the idea of what is stillness, for me, as a practitioner, I look at when the Buddha sat, so for 21 days prior to awakening, he sat under the Bodhi tree and in essence said, I'm not moving until I figure out why we suffer and how to free ourselves from the cycle of rebirth and, end all suffering. So he did what they say, still the body, still the speech, still the mind. Now, yes, I get it. I mean, even if we're like what we would refer to as perfectly still, everything is still moving, right? All that, those things in school, I never really understood, those like planets, and that just never made sense to me. But apparently we're moving really fast right now, yeah? But we can still, like, I'm gonna forget that part for a minute and just be like, yo, I'm a person who was constantly moving. I need to learn to just slow down. So I'm gonna still my body physically as much as possible within all of the crazy movement around me, right? And then the stilling of the speech. That one's relatively simple because close your mouth. Something else I needed to learn how to do, right? That one also is fairly simple. Then stillness of the mind. And that, to me, and I think for many, is the most difficult, because no matter how still our body is and how closed our mouth is, what about this crazy thing? And stillness to me is having the ability to, because for example, you can be moving and still feel still. Because I believe with practice, stillness isn't so much just the body and the speech, it's the mind. And can it be present? So as the Buddha taught, when you're breathing in, taking a short breath, know you're breathing in, taking a short breath. If you're breathing out, taking a long breath, know you're breathing out, taking a long breath. What he was saying in essence was awareness and observation of sensation of breath. And if you can hold your attention on that breath and sensation of breath, it allows your mind to settle and become still and almost move with sensation of breath. Dogen would refer to, it was a Zen master who lived from 1200 to 1253 that founded what's called Soto Zen, one of the kind of two main surviving schools of Zen Buddhism. And he has a book titled Beyond Thinking. And he would say that in the stillness, right, in the zazen, the seated meditation practice, as the mind becomes one really with the breath, the body and the mind completely fall away. So easy. See? So just work on the body and mind falling away and becoming one with sensation of breath, and you will have achieved perfect stillness, my friend. You should have it by Friday.
Easy,
Yeah. So, but I think, baby steps is just, for some people who has a really hard time just physically being still. I mean, it's like physical stillness is really difficult. So just work on, just sit. Can I sit for 5 minutes and not move? Like, can I do a meditation for 5 minutes and not scratch my arm and not adjust? I'm not talking about 3 hours of like perfect stillness and being in excruciating pain. I just mean every time you have a little itch, can you just observe the itch? And in the Zen practice specifically, you practice perfect. You practice absolute stillness. You don't move. There's an awareness of the itch, and then it's back to breath. So for those, especially if you have trouble with stillness, just try like 3 minutes. So I'm just going to sit. I'm not going to move. Because what really needs to move isn't the body, it's the mind. The mind needs to move to fix something that's uncomfortable. Is that itch going to like destroy you or ruin your life? No. Can you just observe it as an itch and come back to breath? So if you have trouble with stillness, just try 3 to 5 minutes of just, I'm not going to move. I mean, you can blink, you can breathe, or just have the eyes closed or slightly open, whatever it is. I don't know if that's helpful, but yeah. What else? Yeah.
Just you saying like being in excruciating pain, sitting still. How does the Buddha overcome pain? And I know he's a professional at it, but I was wondering if he does he acknowledge the pain and then release it, kind of like distractions, or is it something more?
Yeah, professional. He'd have a pretty cool LinkedIn profile, huh? So the question around how does the Buddha acknowledge, what does he do with the pain, acknowledging it? I think it's important to understand first and foremost that the Buddha was a human. So he wasn't like beyond physical pain. If he kicked a rock while walking, it was gonna feel that, right? It's not like, oh, I'm the Buddha, I don't feel pain. He felt it, I would imagine. But would he scream at the rock? Would he complain about the pain? Or would he maybe have kicked the rock and say to people, don't kick a rock, it hurts? So I think it's important to understand that even, as the Buddha, there was a recognition, right? I mean, at 80 years old when he died, like, he was sick. He was in pain. He knew he was going to die. So he wasn't free from that stuff, just like we're not free from it. But the way he observed it, the way he responded to it, the way I think he would have used it as ways to teach and to share, to me, is what actually makes him so relatable and just like no different than we are. So acknowledging the pain, understanding the impermanence of it, meaning it'll pass. And if you don't want your foot to hurt from kicking a rock, stop kicking rocks. And that's a metaphor for everything else we do in life that hurts us. So awareness, and there's a great Buddhist teaching called the second arrow, which is, the first arrow, something hurts us. We kicked the rock, our foot hurts, we broke the toe. So now we have a broken toe. That's the end of it. That's the first arrow. But what we do is, my toe's broken, now I'm angry. Now I'm angry that I have a broken toe. Now I'm sad because I'm angry because I have a broken toe. Now I'm depressed because I'm angry, because I'm sad, because I have a broken toe. So we turn that one situation into so many levels of problems instead of just being with the broken toe. So, make sense?
Yeah, he's a tough dude.
What's that?
He was a tough guy.
Yeah, I don't even know if I would, I don't know. I don't know if I would say he was tough. I think he was just aware. Yeah. Just aware. Life hurts. That's the first thing he said. Life is filled with suffering. So, he came in and went out 80 years later, and his entire life was filled with suffering, just like ours. Yeah.
Is there any importance in Buddhism on family? I know that with Buddha, the Buddhist story, he left his family for a time, and so it kind of seems Buddhism could be individualistic. But I'm just not sure if they say anything about family, being the family, or if it's good to leave family.
Don't leave family.
Okay.
Yeah. So the teaching, for those who don't know, and the question for those who didn't hear it virtually, the question was around the importance of family in Buddhism. And, as Sean said that, from the story, that the Buddha left family. So that might kind of give this idea very often that like, oh, well, the Buddha left home, so we should leave home. Yeah, don't leave home. Right? One thing I always like to challenge people, and Al, I know this is your favorite thing. I saw you smiling. I know you don't have to shut up. But the one thing that I'll ask you this: when he was 29 and left, so those who don't know, he was married with a child at 29 years old. In the middle of the night, after 30-second story. After leaving home at 29 years old, he went out into the world, he saw old age, he saw sickness, and he saw death. And he'd never seen these things. So he went back home and he said, what's this? I've never seen old age, never seen sickness, never seen death. And then he saw an ascetic, like a simple monk or nun. And he asked his buddy Chana, he said, hey, does this happen to all of us? And Chana said, yes, we all get old, we all get sick, we all die, or we all age, we all get sick, and we all die. And he was like, well, how can I live in a world of wealth and riches when there's a world out there that's, that's suffering? So I'm going to leave, I'm going to figure out why we suffer. That way I can share that message. So when he left home at 29, was he enlightened, or was he just a regular unenlightened dude?
I mean, some people have different words for what that qualifies as. But
When he left home at 29, don't try to be smart. When he left home at 29, was he enlightened?
not like,
No. So when he left home, when he left his wife and his child and his family, was he enlightened? No. At 35, when he had the awakening and they considered him the enlightened one, where did he go?
go back home,
Went back home. Why?
to help his family.
To help his family understand how to free themselves from the cycle of birth and death. Now, this is no justification for anyone to go home and be like, yo, honey, I'm leaving because I need to help you all figure out why you're so miserable. But don't worry, I'll be back. Not a green light for that, right? It's also not a green light for us to think, and this is my warning always, to people who think that like, well, if the Buddha left home, then I can do that too, because that means I'll know what to look for. I don't advise that. You ever seen that comic strip of, let me also point out that his child is the mother who raised him, wife, they all became monks and nuns as well when he returned. But there's a beautiful comic strip that usually comes out around the holidays where it's an image of like this little monk dude, and he's in the mountains and whatever, and blah, 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 a couple little clips, and then it gets to the end and they say, now your real test, to see if you've mastered the teachings. And it shows him sitting at like Thanksgiving dinner with a bunch of family, right? In his robe and bald head and all that kind of stuff, saying, here's the real teachings. So too often, I think, in a American culture where people learn about Buddhism, they see it as like this individualistic escape thing. It's not. Whatever you not you personally, but I just meant whatever one is running from, in all likelihood, is where they actually should be. Because that's where the practice is. I don't pretend to think that like, oh, well, the Buddha did it, so I should do it. And, in fact, when I look through the course of my life, anything that I ever tried to run and escape from, the real practice would have been staying there and working through my shit. In it. The escape was the easy way out. Me leaving the monastery life was an escape. Sure, I could spin it and justify it all kinds of ways now and say, well, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is, I was escaping from something. And when we're escaping from something, we're usually hurting someone. So, practice is right in front of you. All your challenges, your family, your friends, loved ones, strangers, those that really push all those buttons and just really like get under your skin, they are your true bodhisattvas. They are your true blessings. So good luck with them. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to close on that, and we'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. may all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. All right, a few quick announcements from our Dharma Bum host Eddie before you head out.
Hello everyone, I'm tonight's host Eddie. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They're simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction, and our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 5 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and also posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it and bring it back whenever you're done with it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. If a few people could stay to close and latch the windows, that would be helpful. Thank you for being here. We wish you well and hope to see you all again.
Thanks, Eddie. And New Year's, if anybody has never done a silent and sober New Year's, you can get them both done at the same time here on New Year's Eve. We'll do 7 o'clock, we'll do a potluck, vegetarian potluck. 9 o'clock, I'll do a history of the Dharma Bum Temple, and about 11:30, we start piling in here for the midnight meditation. The whole night's not silent, just the meditation piece. So some people come at 7, they're home by 9. Some people come at 9 and, stay through the rest. And some people just show up at 11:30 just to sit for 20 minutes silent going into the new year. So, some people stay all night, but, well, not all night. We kick you out by about 12:30. But you're all welcome. So thank you all. Be safe.